All right. Week 1, lesson 1, part 1 on the part 2, sorry, of the broadcast. And we just finished talking about kind of our kind of administrative stuff, and we'll talk administrative stuff again when you know, here and again when we go back to it. Every time I give you an assignment or something or whatever, we'll talk administrative stuff, and there'll be like, you know, one part of our videos for that particular day will be, hey, this is our assignment. Here's when it's due. This is what our assignment's about, that kind of stuff, and that'll be one video, right? So that way, it'll probably be the first video that we talk about if I'm doing an assignment that day. Example, next week when you get your first assignment, we'll do that the first thing after your quiz. Hint, hint. So stuff I talk about today, right? I'm going to ask you 5 to 10 questions next week, right? So please, you know, the great thing to do is it's going to be, some of it's going to be in your PowerPoint, some of it'll be the stuff we talk about here in class, the stuff we practice, and it'll be, you know, again, something easy for you to handle, worth 2% of your final mark. Okay. So the next piece, what I want to talk about is actually Visual Studio. So let's talk about Visual Studio Code. So let's set up our environment a little bit, and let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of it. So I'm on my Mac, but it doesn't matter if you're on a Mac user or a Windows user or a Linux user. It's fairly similar. I'm going to bring up Visual Studio Code here. When you do, it brings up the last thing that you were working on, right? But that doesn't matter. What we're going to do is we're going to put together a new example folder. So let's put a new example file up, and I'm going to call it COMP1073 lesson 1, right? That's what it's going to be called. So let's just do that. So a new folder, somewhere on your desktop, please. And we're going to, and now that you've downloaded Visual Studio Code, and I'm just going to call it, you know, again, rename it as, I don't know how I did that. Let's do that again. I'm going to call it COMP1073 in lesson 1, right? So lesson 1, and of course, somehow COMP1073 lesson 1 is already taken because I made that other folder. Let's just kill this one. Let's do that. I don't know why I did that. Okay, and then once you've done that, you drag this folder just from a functionality into this pane over here on the right, right? So just drag it in, and it's going to be a fresh copy of your stuff, right? So that's what you're going to see. Pretty blank at this point, right? So what do you have here? You have some icons on the left, right? Just some orientation about Visual Studio Code to get you going, right? You have kind of this control pane in the middle here, and then you have your editor space on the right. Okay, so that's where all the editing happens. Okay, what you want to try and do is in here you want to organize your files from the get-go. Now there's 2 ways to do this. You can do that here in the editor, right? Or you can certainly do it just like in Sublime or in Brackets. You can do it on the operating system, and it'll pick up your changes and reflect them here, right? So you can do it both places, not a problem. So let's do that here. So if I hover over my project, notice I get a couple of icons, right? One of them is the new file icon. Another one is a new folder icon, and some other things as well, right? So let's do a new folder icon. I want to set up my folder structure with you guys a little bit differently. So you might have seen JavaScript as a JS folder, and you may have seen CSS as a CSS folder. We're not going to do that. We're going to have a different folder structure that I'm going to be following, and I'd like you to follow me for one reason. I'm going to be building it so that way when you do things with Rich in the future, right? As an example, when you do any kind of ASP.NET or whatever, the folder structure is going to be compatible with the Microsoft side as well, right? So it's not just compatible with open source, but Microsoft. And Microsoft uses 2 different folder names. One of them, which I'd like you to create, is called scripts. So let's just call it scripts with a capital S. And then the next one is called, and again, just make sure it's not, scripts isn't highlighted when you do this. The next one is going to be called content. So those are the 2 folders that Microsoft likes to create, and I like to try and align myself so as to be as generic as possible. So content and scripts. Content is where I'm going to put my app.css, and you know what? You'll be happy to hear that through the entire course, we're not going to be focusing too much on CSS. We're going to be focusing on JavaScript. So for CSS and a CSS framework, we're going to be using Bootstrap. Who's used Bootstrap in the past? You guys should mostly have had some exposure, yeah? And if you haven't, it's okay, because you know it's going to be cool if we can download and install Bootstrap together, not a problem. And we'll do it manually at first, and near the end, I'll give you some tools so you can do it automatically. All right, so our content folders where our custom app.css is going to go, yeah?
It keeps dropping content under scripts as a subfolder.
Yeah, I just drag it out. So if it's like this, right? Just kind of drag it out like this. Okay, and it'll just drag it out. Okay, so not a problem. It's got some flexibility there. Okay, so so content and scripts. So under content, I want to create a new file. So I'm going to right-click on when I have content highlighted, right? And I'm going to click New File, and let's just call this thing app.css. App.css, right? And then I'll put a short comment in there that this is where my custom styles live here, right? Which is where my custom style sheet's going to be. This is my custom style sheet. Okay? I haven't done anything. There's no styles in there right now, but this is, if I was going to put any custom styles, I'd probably align it there. Okay, scripts. This is kind of our main folder here, right? And from the get-go, although there's actually 3 ways to attach JavaScript to your site, I'm going to be doing it in the way that, and we're going to be talking about progressive enhancement in a second. I'll always attach JavaScript in its own file, all right? I'm not going to mix my JavaScript and my CSS and my HTML at all, ever, mishmashed into one HTML file, ever, right? You might see it out there, doesn't mean it's a good thing, right? It means that someone didn't know what they were doing, or it's old school, an old school way of doing things. Today, we don't do that. We kind of create separate files. So I'm going to right-click on my scripts, and we're going to create a new file, and we're going to call it app.js, right? It's app.js. Okay, cool. So we got our app.js, we got our app.css, and well, we're missing one piece, right? We can't do anything with our CSS and our JavaScript without an index.html or some kind of HTML file that ties everything all together, right, on the front end. So let's do that now. So we'll kind of click away, and we're going to right-click, and we're going to say New File, and we're going to call it index.html. Okay, cool. That's kind of our default folder structure, right? Any questions, or if you've not seen this stuff before, hopefully as developers and designers, this is all easy for you. Okay, I don't want to type my index.html by hand because I could, but it's going to take a lot of time, and I want to create a kind of a template for us. So I'm going to go to getbootstrap.com. So let's go to getbootstrap.com, and under Get Bootstrap, we can go to the Getting Started section. I'll wait till you guys catch up. Getting started, and I'm going to scroll down partway down the page until we get to this section that says our basic template right here. Here's our basic template, and if you click copy on the corner here of our basic template, you're going to get all this stuff. I'm not going to keep all of it yet, but I'm going to copy it right now, and I'm going to I'm going to go back to Visual Studio Code after I've copied it, and just right-click and paste. And you get some really cool syntax highlighting and all that kind of stuff that you normally expect in an editor of any kind of worth, right? Really, really quickly. Did you get that, or do you want me to go back?
Yeah.
Go back, too fast. Okay, here it is. So here's getbootstrap.com/getting started, and I want to go down all the way to my little example, grab this file, and drag and drop it in, or copy and paste it into your Visual Studio Code. Nice and easy, right? So why am I getting this from Bootstrap? Why don't I just write it myself? Yeah, I could. But there's some really cool things there that they include in Bootstrap's little template. One is their character set UTF-8, which I'm going to type. Language is English, which I'm going to type, right? Name, viewport, and content width is equal to device width initial scale 1. What's that for? Who remembers what that meta tag is for? Anybody? Huh? Responsiveness, right? For mobile devices, that's the meta tag you need, right? That meta tag, right? And then there's also this XUA compatible content, i.e. is equal to Edge. That's a new one, right? So we're going to use that one for all those Edge browsers out there, right? So that's why I wanted to grab this one. And the other one is it has some links right now to Bootstrap that doesn't exist. We have a CSS Bootstrap style sheet. I don't have that right now. So I need to get rid of that and change that right now. And also, I've got some other stuff down here for Ajax and all this other stuff with jQuery to make Bootstrap run, and I don't have that either, right? So I'm going to have to get these things from Bootstrap, right? So let's go back. Let's check this out to make this all work. So here's my stuff. I'm going to just clean it up a little bit, and I'm just going to collapse this part right here. And to do that, I'm just going to hold my mouse cursor just between the editor and the kind of the inspector here, and just grab this and pull it to the left, right? So it kind of makes it so it's all one big screen. Again, we're just getting used to the editor here. And I'm going to save this file. So here's my index.html. Be aware that even if you can't keep up with me, it's okay because I'm going to share my stuff with you on GitHub in a second, right? So you'll have everything that I have. All right, let's get rid of some of these this stuff. So I'll get rid of this. And instead of Bootstrap template, we'll rename. If you go on the web, the kind of the easiest way to go is come up on Get Bootstrap. And if I go back to the main site here, so I go to Bootstrap, notice how there's a download Bootstrap button on the main website here. Just go here, click onto it. It'll take you to Bootstrap. Now there's ways of using Bootstrap with a CDN, right? So that's kind of like the second way to do it, right? What's a CDN? Who remembers what a CDN is? Anyone? Yes, it's actually the content delivery network, right? At one point, you know, when someone talked to me about the CDN, the content delivery network, hint, hint, it might be a question on your next test, right? I'm going to throw that in there here and there. Just want to ask you, what's the CDN stand for, right? Content delivery network. So, you know, it used to be I was afraid of it. I was like, content delivery network, that means if the internet's down, that I can't get access to my files, right? Well, hold on, man. If the internet's down, then there's a catastrophe. There's like a zombie apocalypse out there nowadays, right? Because there's no way the internet's going to be down, right? But what if you don't have connectivity? What if you're on a train, plane, someplace where you can't use the internet, that kind of thing? Well, then that becomes a problem, right? So as developers, yes, it's nice to use this in a live setting. If I'm in production, CDN for sure. Because if the internet's down, then your site's down anyway, right? But if in this particular case, if I'm developing and I want to develop anywhere I want, I don't want to be depending on the internet for me to develop. So this is great. Production, development, not so much. So I want to click Download Bootstrap. All right? Download Bootstrap. And it's going to download this distribution of Bootstrap. I'm going to put it here on my desktop, right? So I'm just going to go to Desktop, and I'm going to minimize everything. Actually, I'll go to my other desktop over here, slide over, right? And you can see that it's still downloading. I don't know why I did that, but anyways. And then I'm going to double tap that one, and it's going to provide a little folder for me that I'm going to drag and drop. I'm going to kill this one. So again, you can do on the Windows side, you just extract it to your desktop, make sure it's in a folder like this. Notice I'm keeping my folder nice and handy over here because I want to drag and drop piece parts of it into my other folder, right? Now there's a couple ways you can incorporate all the Bootstrap stuff. And if I open this folder up so you can see it, you see that there's CSS and there's fonts that you can use, as well as JavaScript. So there's a JS section as well, right? I need the JS. I need the CSS. I kind of need the fonts, and the fonts have to be one step higher. As an example, just close this down. One step higher than where my CSS is. So they're not in the same folder. So I can certainly have a fonts folder on their own outside of the content folder, or away one step up from where I have my stuff. The easiest way to do this would be to grab my CSS fonts and drag this into my content folder, right? Because that's where it would be looking for it. And my JavaScript, my JS folder, my stuff in my JS, inside of a lib folder somewhere in my scripts, right? Again, all I'm doing is I'm organizing my folder structure, because this is one of the most important things you can do as a developer designer, right? If you don't organize yourself early, it's going to be pretty ugly later, right? So please, let's work together to keep ourselves organized. And actually, on an assignment, you'd be marked on this, right? So if your folder structure is all over the place, bad, right? We want to keep it organized. So how do I do that? What would I recommend? So again, we can do this in the operating system, certainly. But let's see if we can try and do this with VS Code. So we're going to do right within code. So I'm going to kind of drag and drop it. So I'm going to go back to code for a second and bring this up. And then let's see if I can bring up that folder structure here. If I go to desktop, and if I go to Bootstrap, here it is. Is there a way, would it accept, I'm just going to kind of open this up again. So if you want to open the pane up again on the to see your files, just drag it over. Right? And let's see if it'll accept that in my content. So can I drag and drop? Is that possible? And I think that's something we have to explore, right? So if I grab my CSS file and if I drag it over, can I do that? And if you notice how I kind of get a green plus here, that's a good sign. It says, well, folders cannot be copied into the workspace. Please select individual files to copy them. So to me, this doesn't make any sense. What I'd like to try and do, and sometimes your editor will allow that to happen. Myself, I like to kind of use the operating system. Sorry. The operating system is a little easier for me. And so I'm going to grab my CSS and fonts folders and just drag it into my content folder like this. Right, so now it actually destroys what was in the distribution, but who cares, right? My JavaScript, though, I want to break it out. I want to rename this one before I drag it over as lib, because all my libs, all my libraries are going to live in the same folder, right? So I want to have all my JavaScript, my jQuery, all that stuff's going to live in the same folder, right? So I'm going to take my lib folder and drag it into my scripts folder. There we go. So all I did was renamed it. And now I don't need this folder anymore, right? I don't need this folder anymore. So I can get rid of it. Done. So now when I look at my folder structure, I have content, and then I have CSS, and then fonts. Okay, now you might say, well, you said you weren't going to use CSS. I'm not. I'm using content. CSS is just another subfolder. Under scripts, though, I'm definitely not using that structure. It's called lib, and that's where I'm going to access my Bootstrap. So this is my folder structure, right? Why am I doing this? Because there's less modification for me to do when I drag and drop in my my CSS. Yes?
Can you change the JS folder name to
lib? Yeah.
Rename it before we pull it over?
Or after. It doesn't matter, right? I mean, it's just as long as at the end of the day it becomes lib, you're good to go. Why lib? Because I want to have other libraries in there, not just may not be JavaScript, it may be something else. Who knows in the future. I want to keep flexible. Okay, cool. So I've got my stuff here. I want to connect my my Bootstrap up, right? And I want to see it in VS Code now. So let's go across and let's see if we capture. Well, there it is. Look, here's my CSS, and here's my fonts, my glyph icons, and inside my scripts, I've got my lib folder, and I need all this stuff. I'm still missing a folder, right? I'm still missing something. I can't enable Bootstrap without jQuery, and we're going to be using jQuery later on. So think of this file we're making here as almost like a little boilerplate for us to use over and over again. When I use this file, we're going to base all of our other files on the one we're making right here, right? Because once we have it going, why would I do this again, right? Just to waste your time, right? So let's just do this the first time, and I'm going to put it up on GitHub, and you'll see it as COMP1073 lesson 1. We're always going to use this one file to modify it and to work off that one as we progress, right? So we have to make this as nice as possible. Okay, cool. So what do we do here? Well, we need to connect on the CSS side. Let's do that first before we download jQuery, right? So again, let's remind ourselves how we do this. I want to link our CSS to our file. What do I do? What do I type? Link, right? And actually, when you type link, it gives you this. It gives you rel, is equal to style sheet. And href, it asks for where the your CSS is. What's the path to my CSS for Bootstrap? And I want to use the min version of the minified version of Bootstrap, right? Why would I use the minified version of a library or a CSS structure? Why would I do that? Huh? But why would I use the minified version? I'm asking. I'm going to use the minified version. I want you. Sorry. It's faster, right? Whenever we use minified versions of our libraries, they're faster than the expanded version. Expanded version is great if you want to do some development. And a lot of these libraries are open source, so you can fool around with them or whatever. But at the end of the day, you don't have to. And if I in a production environment, I want it to run as fast as possible to give the best user experience. So I want everything minified, right? All things being equal. And I'll put that proviso in there. Okay, so let's do that. So I'll say content. That's from our first piece, because we're looking in the content folder. Then I'm looking down into the CSS folder, right? Because that's CSS. And then inside my CSS folder, I want to grab bootstrap.min.css. Let's type that, bootstrap.min.css. Okay, so that's our first CSS file. Right? I want to grab others. I like Bootstrap, but I also want to grab the theme, bootstrap theme.min.css, and for this I'm just going to copy and paste. Right, so I'm going to copy this whole line here, and we're just going to paste it below. Of course, I've offset it a little bit, and I'm just going to just modify the name so it says bootstrap-theme, if I can type it today, dash.min.css. So I've got my bootstrap, I've got my theme, and now how about my own custom style sheets? Where should that go? Should it go before the bootstrap style sheets, or should it be after? Why my custom app.css that I talked about earlier? I have an app.css down here, right? That I made. The first thing we did was we made an app.css file. Why am I? Well, where would that go? You're saying after?
Everything could be overwritten by the Bootstrap.
Actually, let me put it this way. It will be overwritten by Bootstrap because Bootstrap includes something called normalize.css, which normalizes, resets all the CSS patterns, right? So if you do that, and you put your CSS in there before Bootstrap, it'll kill it. So don't do that. Do it after. Always do your app.css or your custom CSS styles.css after, right? So again, I'm going to just from a from that, I'm going to type link, and then in here, I know it's in content. I'm going to go in there, but I don't have to go into my CSS folder because my app.css is just sitting nicely in my content, right? So I can just say app.css. So there's my CSS. The nice thing to do here when we format this boilerplate as we're moving is I want to make a comment here. So comments again, we kind of do it like this. That's the syntax, right? And we want to say this is our CSS section, right? So we can see, tell other users what we're doing, right? Our CSS section. Notice how our CSS section is nicely at the top, right? Of in the head of our document. Okay. So this links that all together. But again, Bootstrap that's not enough for Bootstrap. You need jQuery and the JavaScript component of Bootstrap in order for it to be active 100%. Okay, or else you're missing functionality. It'll work. Just the CSS files alone will be good. We want to activate Bootstrap at the bottom, right? So again, I need that JavaScript, and I'm going to always put my JavaScript at the bottom of my, just before my body tag. Why do I do that? Why is it the bottom of my body tag? Yeah. Last thing loaded. Why? Why do I care about last loading? Right? Yes. You almost had it. Right. So again, so if my JavaScript crashes, everything crashes, right? If I load it in my head, right? But if I load everything else up, which really your content should load without JavaScript, right? JavaScript is an enhancer, right? So if I load it after, it's non-blocking. Hint, hint, that question will be on your test. Yes. Yes, you could, but that's advanced. Stop. All right. There's many ways to do things. JavaScript and HTML technologies, HTML, CSS technologies, web technologies, there's a million ways to do the same thing. So I'm showing you one way, all right? This isn't the way or the best way necessarily for you. For this application, it's the best way. Tomorrow there's going to be something else that you may have another way of doing it, right? Which is better. Okay, so let's do the same thing. Now I know I'm going to comment, so I might as well put in a comment right away, say JavaScript section, because I'm going to do my JavaScript section here. So remember I talked about progressive enhancement really briefly. We're going to talk about that in our PowerPoints. And one of the things that progressive enhancement tells us, right, the idea of progressive enhancement is we want to keep our layers separate. So we want to keep our structure layer, the way things have been structured, our HTML, our presentation layer, right, which is our CSS, and our behavior layer separate from each other. Almost like the whole MVC idea, model, view, and controller, the same kind of focus, this three-tier architecture when we do our stuff. So I'm never, ever going to put my JavaScript inline, just like I would never put my CSS inline, ever, right? That is like a faux pas. You do that, you're like, he doesn't know what he's doing, right? There are, however, times where I'll do stuff to kick things off for you a little easier this round. So I might put some attribute, for example, in my body tag to make sure my JavaScript fires for the first time. Afterwards, we'll remove that component altogether, and then you'll flow right into JavaScript when the page loads. But the page, the reason why we're putting JavaScript at the bottom is we want to wait till the page loads and then load up our JavaScript for the enhancer, right? Okay, so that's where our JavaScript section goes. Yes?
Why you would put JavaScript?
Why? Okay, great. So let's say we have a multi-page application, and I put my JavaScript inline on my indexed.html, but I want my other pages to have the same structure. What do I need to do? copy it every single time from one page to the other. So every time I got to put a page, if I want the same effect, I've got to copy my JavaScript over and over and over again to different pages, right? And that's not effective. If I make it inside a document, like for example, external file, I have to do it once. And then I have to just point to that document within my pages. And then the effect, the enhancing effect that JavaScript is going to give us for our user experience is going to last throughout all of our entire project, right?
What if you want just a little bit of overriding on that one particular page?
I would do it through my external document. I would always target it through my external document. I could do it. I would never do it inline, ever, right? If you do it inline, it's kind of a lazy way to do it because it's like maybe that's the only way you know how to do it, right? But it's not the right way. The right way today is separation of concerns, right? So you always separate your JavaScript, your programming, you separate from your presentation, from your structure. That's the right way to do it.
You have to give it a new name or something.
Which?
I just did a bootstrap, and then there's just a little change I need to make on one page versus the whole thing.
Right. So I would make a little custom function in an external file because maybe I'll use it again, right? So if I want to reuse my code, I'm always going to put it in an external document, right? And that's why we do it for reusability for the most part. Okay, but great question. I love that question because it asked the question. Like it's the same reason why we don't do our CSS inline, right? Why don't we do our CSS inline? It's the same thing, right? The old school way of doing it was, and especially if you use Expression Web. Who's used Expression Web in the past? Anybody? Expression Web is like drag and drop. You drag, drop, and then all of a sudden it puts everything in line, right? All your CSS. That's bad. It looks nice, right? But it's only for that page. And then you have to redo all that over and over again. Dreamweaver does some of the same stuff too. Be very careful with Dreamweaver. If you're a Dreamweaver user and you drag and drop some stuff into Dreamweaver, you're like, it just writes the CSS for you, really like ugly. So please don't do that. We want to separate concerns. Okay, so I want to connect my JavaScript, and I've got my scripts here in here, and now it's a little different. I'm going to write script, right? And in my script, I want to do something like this. I want to say source is equal to, and then I want to target my scripts /lib/bootstrap.min.js. I can't run Bootstrap without jQuery, so I got to get that now. But I'll wait till you guys get this. All this is doing is I'm using a script element, right? And I'm creating the attribute, using the attribute source attribute, the src attribute of the script element to point to the file that I'm going to be loading, right? That's external. In this particular case, my library is in bootstrap.min.js, which is inside my lib folder, which is inside my scripts folder, and that's the path that I have to follow, right? Now remember, when we load up HTML or CSS, because HTML is not a compiled language, neither is CSS, it's an interpreted language. The browser is our main engine that interprets and renders the result, right? So what it does is it goes through line by line and it reads everything, and as it comes to the CSS stuff, it reads the entire file into this index.html, and it'll keep going like that, one line at a time. When it comes to here, it'll try and read this in as well. It may not activate it at all, right? Because even though we read our Bootstrap, there's some activation that we have to do, and a lot of that's done with inline. If you look at the bootstrap.min.js or the expanded version, bootstrap.js, you'll see that it actually calls itself in some part. Now that's for later. I'm just mentioning it so you know how it works automatically. All right, so we need jQuery, like I said, to activate this. And where do I get jQuery? I can go online and go to jQuery.com. And jQuery is just another library, right? So we were using JavaScript libraries. And yeah, you might say, well, I don't even know what JavaScript libraries are. How come we're using them already? Don't worry. Do what I'm doing for now, and then we'll explain it after. Okay, so here's jQuery. And jQuery is just a JavaScript library. It's a helper library that helps us be more productive with JavaScript. Okay, that's all it is. And it's useful in many other projects out there. You can grab it here for download jQuery. So it should be the same kind of thing. So I'm going to click download jQuery. There's two versions, version 1 and version 2. Now, because we don't care, we don't have a previous site in place, and we're doing a new greenfield project, let's use version 2, right? You may see, though, that some sites use version 1. And the reason why they use version 1 is there's breaking changes between version 2 and version 1, which means if I used to use version 1 and now I'm using version 2, some sites won't work the same way. And so that's why that we keep both versions alive for now, because until the majority of users get off of using a version 1.x, we need to keep it up there. So for now, for us, we don't need to. All we need to use is the compressed version, right? The production jQuery that we need for our site. So let's just download this one. And if you notice, it's the jQuery file. Like it's actually the minified version of the file, right? Which is what I want. So I want this and a couple of other things, right? So I want to grab this, and because I'm going right to my desktop, I want to download it directly into my lib folder, if you can, right? So I'm going to kind of target my lib folder on my desktop. So I'm going to go into my COMP1073 lesson 1. I'm going to go into my scripts, into my lib folder, and I'm going to put that in there. Now, if you didn't do that, you can always drag and drop it into your folder on Windows or Mac. So that's the first thing I want to do. Next thing is I want to grab my uncompressed version of jQuery as well. There's a reason for this. If you ever want to look at jQuery, we want to grab this too. So I'm going to grab this one, and if you notice, this is just the unminified version. I'll put that in there. And I'll also grab the map file for jQuery. Let's just grab that one, these three files.
All in the lib folder?
All in the lib folder. Okay, good. So I have all these files. They've been downloaded and they've been placed in my lib folder. Let's take a look at Visual Studio Code and see what I got. Here's my jQuery 2.2.0 min.js, and I want to attach this file, min.js, before my Bootstrap file in order for me to make my boilerplate work, right? And so Bootstrap requires jQuery for it to work. Therefore, in the order of loading, I have to have jQuery first and then Bootstrap, okay? Because Bootstrap depends on jQuery libraries, files, script that's already been written for it to work. So let's write that in. So I'm going to say script. I'm going to write by hand, and again I'll do source, and we'll do scripts lib, and instead of bootstrap.min.js, I'll go jQuery, and you got to be careful how you write this in. 2.2.0 again .min.js. Okay, so that's the version of jQuery that I'm using. Okay, that's what it's got to look like. Notice that you have to put the proper dashes and dots in there, or else the version of jQuery won't work, because it will be pointing at a file that doesn't exist. Now, some people, what they do is they rename jQuery to just jQuery.min.js to simplify. That's cool, but the problem with that is you don't know what version you're carrying around, right? So I don't recommend, if you're using a production or a development version, you want to understand what version of jQuery you're using, right? On the CDN, you could just say jQuery latest, and you're good to go. Who cares what it is? You can just run the latest version of jQuery. Another reason why I want to use a CDN in production when I'm actually live, right, is because jQuery, if I run jQuery 2.2, and so do you, right, and so do you, it's cached, right? So as soon as I go there one time, right, I don't have to load it up again. So it actually comes up to faster loading times for anyone who uses this version of jQuery if it's on the content delivery network, as opposed to if it's on my local server, I have to load it up into my browser, which takes longer load times. So the CDN is actually faster, yeah. Sure. Yes, it did, yeah. You just can't see it, or there it is, it's right there. Okay, so we've got our jQuery, we've got our Bootstrap, and you know what? There's one more thing I want to do. I want to put in our own JavaScript file, right? Because we're going to do some JavaScript in this course. We're not going to just do jQuery and Bootstrap. So let's make some space in here in the bottom, and we'll just call this, our script files. Call it scripts, let's say. And we're going to do a scripts tag, and in my attribute, I'm going to say source is equal to, and remember, we don't have to go into the lib folder. Our app.js lives outside of the lib folder. If I collapse this, right underneath scripts. So it's going to say source is equal to scripts, and then it's app.js that I want to kind of attach. And I'm doing it in the same order I kind of did my app.css, right? So first I load my libraries, then I load my own custom scripts. Why? So I can take advantage of the libraries if I want to, right? If I load my custom scripts first, then I may or may not have access to my libraries, depending on the namespace, which I'll explain later. Okay, so that's the order. The order makes a difference in JavaScript. Notice that there's a lot of little links here to this index.html, right? Lots of stuff linked in here and no functionality yet. Okay, I want to include one more thing in our boilerplate, which is very popular these days, which is Font Awesome. So before we run this thing, I want to download and install Font Awesome, right? Because Font Awesome gives us some really cool icons that we can use for mobile, right? And when we create our websites. So let's grab that. So let's go find Font Awesome online. So I go online, Font Awesome. And it's Font Awesome, not Fort Awesome. Font Awesome, it's actually, it's spelled fortawesome.github.io. I guess someone took it before they had a chance to do it. Font Awesome. And this is, again, a CSS toolkit, right, that gives us some really cool fonts, right, like icon fonts that we can use in our CSS and in our when we create our websites, right? And to look at some of the icons that it comes with before we download it, if you notice, if I want to look at for something like, I don't know, the home icon, so I want to make a home button icon, this is what it gives you, and it's all programmatic. It's basically all you do is you just add a little bit of CSS or around a tag as an example. It's a CSS library, and also just like Bootstrap, it populates that icon right in there, right? So it's really, really cool, and it's an icon that's a font rather than an image, which means faster loading times. So much better than, again, font icons are the way to go these days in terms of load times. Okay, so let's download this one. So let's go back to the beginning where it says download, and it says, hey, let's get it. Take your icon game to the next level with Fort Awesome. No thanks, just download Font Awesome. Grab this one. Okay, so again, Font Awesome is going to download and go somewhere. I want to put it on my desktop, just like I did with Bootstrap. All right, so here's my desktop. Save it. Okay, and I'm going to go to my desktop again, and in the operating system, just like we did last time, this is where we do everything, right? So I'm going to find my Font Awesome zip file and extract it here on the desktop. And on the Mac, double-click. On Windows machines, extract. I recommend 7-zip again. But here it is. Here's my Font Awesome. Notice how there's a pattern: CSS and fonts, right? And here we have CSS and fonts, right? Well, this is cool. But there's some stuff we can do to save some space. I'm just going to grab my fonts in my Font Awesome CSS and just drag it into my CSS file, just to make it all one. So we don't have like multiple CSS files. We don't need to. So grab my Font Awesome and drag and drop it into my CSS folder that exists in my folder. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all my fonts, my Font Awesome fonts, all the way down, right, and grab all these and put them in my fonts folder. Right, there we go. Now there's also some space for less and SCSS, which is SAS. We're going to leave those alone right now, right? So we're not going to include those. Just those fonts is what we need, and we can just close this off. And we can delete Font Awesome. We don't need this anymore. So all I've done is drag my CSS into my CSS file, right? If I've done it correctly, and my fonts into my fonts folder, right? As an example, in my content folder, right? Are we all clear with that? Very simple. Now let's attach it like we did the other ones. So we're going to go back to my Visual Studio Code, and while we build this up together, I'm going to attach my Font Awesome. Where should it go? I want to use Font Awesome in my app.css. Where should it go? Should it go above my app CSS, below my app CSS? Thanks. What do you think? What do you think? Above my app.css, because you want to be taking advantage of it, but below Bootstrap. Just like we would put ours. So I put it below here. So make a space on line 11 if you're following along. And I want to copy this whole line right here like this. We'll just modify it. And instead of content CSS Bootstrap, we're going to go content CSS font-awesome. So we'll get rid of this. And it'll be font-awesome.min.css. Font-awesome. .min.css. All right, so we got that one. Building up a little boilerplate here, like I said. And we don't have to worry about the fonts. The actual fonts are referenced from within the CSS file. So once you put your CSS in there, you're good to go. Whew, that was a lot of work, right? Building up our boilerplate for the first time. But I wanted to get you to know Visual Studio Code. That was the trick, right? Drag and drop, build your little thing for the first time. And now I want to run my app, right? How do I run my app? Well, normally you'd have to swim through your operating system to find your folder and double-click on your index.html. First of all, let's save this. But with Visual Studio Code, if you go here in this pane right here, this control pane, if you will, or project section, and if I right-click here, I can reveal on the Mac in Finder or reveal in Explorer on Windows. So try this out, reveal in Explorer or reveal in Finder. And what it does is it brings up exactly this where the folder is. So if I want to double-click on my index.html now, like I normally would, right? So I double-click on this thing, it'll bring up my page, Hello World, right? There's my Hello World, and I got classic Bootstrap styling attached to this thing already. Yes, everyone with me? Right? Huh? Sure, let's try it again. That's why I'm asking, is everyone with me? So I'm here, right? And let's close off, just to make it easy, I'm gonna close off everything else. I'm gonna go up to up here. I'm just gonna close off all these things just to make it so it's just clean up my little desktop here for a second. And we'll leave that up for a second. We'll keep that up for a second. But what I wanna do is if I right click here, somewhere down here inside this space right here, if I right click, or your Finder window in Mac or Linux, as an example, and if I double click on my folder, it'll actually bring it up and you can see my folder structure, right? The content, the index.html, and the scripts. Maybe a little different on Windows, it might be organized by type. And if I double click on my index.html, then I'm gonna get my index.html with Hello World. If everything is done correctly, do you all have this? If you don't, that's okay, because I'm gonna upload this to GitHub, right? And you're going to drag and drop my example project from GitHub. And we'll talk about GitHub in a second because your first lab is all around GitHub today. It's due today, right? So we'll talk about GitHub if you don't have access to it. Okay, so here's my Hello World project. This is cool. This is what I want, right? And if I right-click on my Explorer, all the work we're going to be doing here is with Chrome, right? Because the majority of you guys work with Chrome anyway, right? So if I want to do troubleshooting or debugging on the web with Chrome, I can right-click anywhere and hit Inspect. This is one way to do it, right? And then I want to click Console. Okay, cool. Notice that there's no errors, right? This is what I want to do. This is my JavaScript console, actually, is what it is, right? So this is where I'm going to be doing a lot of my debugging, right? Now, there's nothing to debug. We haven't really kicked off our own JavaScript. There's nothing really on the file except for our Hello World. But this is where we're going to be doing a lot of our debugging right here, right? In our JavaScript console. So let me close that for a second and show you that again. So all I have to do is right-click and hit Inspect, and then go to Console. That's one way. The other way to do it is in the hamburger here on the top right corner of Chrome, right? If I click the hamburger and go to More Tools, right? I can go to Developer Tools, right? And then it'll pull up Console right away, right? So depending on what you want to do, how you want to do it, and there's a shortcut key as well if you notice, right? So there's More Tools and Developer Tools. You can see there might be a shortcut for you on Windows, right, as well, or Mac. You can certainly use the shortcut key to get to Developer Tools. So that's the way you would do that. So this is where I do my debugging within the browser. So I'm using my browser for the debugging. That's my environment. I'm using my editor for scripting and to produce my websites, right? That's what I'm doing. And everything is here on the web, and it's all open source. All right, there's nothing for you to buy or download or anything like that. And that's the majority of how we do our development these days with open source tools.
Is it also available on Firefox? The right click and inspect?
It'd be a little bit different on Firefox. If I was on Firefox, if I bring that up for a second, right? As an example, here it is. And I want to go to the same file. If I want to kind of copy this and see if it works in Firefox, right? Let's see if it works. Paste and go. There it is. Paste and go. So there's Firefox. all I do is copy and paste this line here into Firefox. And if I right-click, right, and I go Inspect Element, take a look, right? I can do that, but why? There's Web Developer here as well. I could go in there. Firefox has some really cool tools. If I go Inspect Element, I can certainly hit Console the same way, right? And you notice that there is no problem within the console. Firefox has actually been quite slick lately with the stuff they've been putting out for developers. But again, I like Chrome more. It's a little bit sleeker, shorter, and there's some extra stuff here. But every browser has its fortes. Okay, so any questions around what we've done so far? Okay, let's share the stuff I've just done. How do I share my stuff, right? Because I've been talking about GitHub and sharing stuff with you guys. How do I do that? And one of your requirements is opening up an account on GitHub. What is GitHub anyway? And all that stuff. And maybe you guys don't know what it is. So GitHub and Git in general, if I was to go to github.com, GitHub is a cloud service, right? And actually the best way to look at this for the first time, if you were going to go to GitHub for the first time, I'm just going to use incognito mode for a second in Chrome. And if I'll go to GitHub so it doesn't know who I am, it'll look like this for the first time. This is what you'll see if you go to GitHub, if you've never been there before, right? GitHub is an online service, cloud service, that allows you to share your files and collaborate with other users by placing them so they can see them online. Okay, that's what it really is about. It also provides things like revision control, a way to backup, collaboration tools, all kinds of other stuff that's free for users. As Georgian college students, and any student across colleges in Ontario pretty much, you also have access to other things. If I was to go to DreamSpark, if you actually go to Microsoft DreamSpark, the software catalog, and this is available to all students, right? So I'm going to www.dreamspark.com/student software catalog, or you can swim through. There is a free something you can download from GitHub. It's called GitHub Education for students, right? And it's the GitHub Student Developer Pack. This is really cool. It's also available to professors, by the way. So if you go there, if you click on the developer pack, you get a free SSL certificate, a free domain from Namecheap, right, for 1 year, and you also get 5 free repositories, if I'm not wrong, for through five private repositories, sorry, through GitHub, right? Normally repositories cost, right? All of our repositories are public unless we go through here. So I would recommend you subscribe to this. Get your pack today. It's free for all students. Again, you need to use your student number and stuff, but it's through dreamspark.com, and you go to product ASPX and so on. It's recorded on the video, so you can always find the link afterwards. What I will do later on is populate this in our up on Blackboard, so you can have favorite links. I put a bunch of links like this up on Blackboard, and this will be one of them. So if you want to get your GitHub student pack, which is kind of cool. Okay. It's really cool. It also gives you Visual Studio Community 2015 edition, and also Visual Studio Online, which is another alternative to GitHub, another service, another cloud service that allows you to store your files online. Okay. Well, let's say you're signing up for GitHub for the first time, and you don't care about a free service or anything like that. I mean, you don't care about private repos. You just want to have public repos. You can just certainly pick a username, put your email address in there, and so on, and create a password, and you're good to go. Right. Now, we're going to use GitHub extensively throughout this course. And like I said, your first lab is create a user ID, make a repo, right? And I want you to upload that into on Blackboard, right? And when you've done that in a text file that I can see, if you follow the instructions, you get 2% of your final grade as a bonus today, right? Which is something that's cool if you want to get that 2%. And I know students love bonus marks, so this is marks above and beyond your extra stuff. So I'm paying you for this, okay? I want to pay you right now to do this GitHub stuff, right? You're not doing it for free, right? I'm giving you it, right? As something that I want you to get done. Please don't forget to do this because it'd be a shame.
What is a repo?
Repository. And we'll talk about what those are. A repository is a place, a container of where you're going to put all your development files, right? So up on GitHub, I'm going to go back into my normal self now. I've signed up, let's say, and I'm up on GitHub, and I'm going to go into, all my stuff is going to be on Georgian College. That's my organization I formed on GitHub. I'm kind of happy with that because no one took it first. Anyways, so Georgian College is where I'm going to have all my files, and I'm going to make a repository. Making a repository is really simple. Once you sign up for GitHub, there's 2 places you can do it. You can certainly click up here where the plus sign is on the top right, create new, or if you have an organization or place you want to put things, you can click there. So for me, I'm going to click here because it'll put it inside my Georgian College section of my repositories, right? I'm going to click on plus. Okay, cool. And now I have to name my repository. It has to be unique across my organization, right? It can't be the same name. So I'm going to call this thing COMP1073 lesson 1. Remember I talked about this being the first lesson we're going to use to build on, as we go forward, right? So this is the first lesson. All right, cool. Now you notice I have a choice of making it public or private. Private costs money, right? But if you sign up for the student pack, you get 5 free repositories, private repositories that you can share for yourself with me. You can initialize it with a README. We'll talk about that later. I'm not going to do that right now. And you can add a gitignore file or a license file if you want to. I'll tell you right now that all modern web developers and developers in general use some form of version control, like GitHub, right? GitHub is one of the most popular version control systems out there and that are free to use for most people. There is an unlimited amount of storage that they'll give you. They don't limit you on how much you can store up there, right? As an example, even for free accounts, which is really cool, right? So I'm going to create a repository. When I do that, it gives me some instructions, right? Because I've created my repository, but my repository sits online, right? I also want to have my local repository. So there's 2 repositories you're going to make, right? One that's local to your system, and one that's remote, okay? One that's remote. The remote repository is the one that I'm going to be using right now, and I haven't asked you to do anything remotely, locally yet, but I will. I'll show you that in a second. So what do I do here, right? So I want to connect to this repo. Well, in order for me to make this work, there's 2 ways I can do this. I can download the desktop tool, which is the easiest way to do it for both Mac and Windows. If you're a Linux user, there's a different process, right? But all you do is go to desktop.github.com, and it'll provide a download for your operating system, right? And this will give you a desktop tool, an actual UI, a native tool that you can use in Windows or Mac, right, as an example. So you can connect to GitHub. But this is not the reason why I want you to download it. The underlying reason why I want you to download this, I have an underlying sneaky reason, is because it also installs Git on the command line for you, right? So that's kind of a cool reason to do it. It installs Git Bash, right, which is kind of cool. So download and install GitHub for desktop. It'll install the tool for you, and on the other side, it'll also install Git. Now, if you're a Mac user, many of us are in the room, I see, you're good. You don't need to do this because you've already got Git, right? You get Git that comes with Mac. If you're a Windows user, you have to work a little harder, right? And you have to download this tool, or you can also go and download a standalone version of Git. So if I go to download Git, not GitHub, download Git. You notice that there's another site you can go to, git-scm.com/downloads, and you can download Git by itself, which is a tool, a command line tool you can download across platform. So again, Mac, Windows, and Linux. Linux will have it built in, right? For the most part, Linux and Mac users don't have a problem. It's the Windows users we have to kind of take care of a little bit here. And that's where you have to download this version, or you can download the desktop version of Git and make it work. Now, the challenge that most Windows users have is that Git, even after you've downloaded it, is not available on the command prompt. And the reason for that is because of your environment variables, right? So you have to modify your system a little bit. But if you download your desktop tool, sometimes it fixes it for you, right? That's my underlying sneaky reason for getting you to do it. So go ahead and download this tool. All right, so now that assuming that you've downloaded the tool and made it run, I want to connect my local repository, right? I haven't created one yet, to my remote repository. In order for you to make this icon work in Visual Studio Code, right here, this icon, you have to have Git running on the command line, all right? I do, and if you're a Mac user, you do, right? All you have to do is click this button. It asks you to initialize your Git repository, and you can do that right here in Visual Studio Code, right? So initialize my Git repository. Notice there's a lot of files that are in here, like tons and tons of them, right? I want to include all of them, so I'm going to click on the top where it says Changes and click Plus. And if I've got all these are all my staged changes, right? And what I want is to create a message, right? Think about what I'm doing here as a snapshot. I'm capturing the state of my files as they are right now. Here's a good reason to use Git. How many people have worked, you're working on your stuff, everything's working fine, you make one change, and your whole thing blows up, right? And you don't know what the hell you did. Where is it? You can't, and you want to start over. You want to hit the computer. Don't hit the computer, all right? Don't hit the computer, right? You don't have to do that. I know, Ari, you want to bang your head sometimes too, but you can use Git to revert, to go back a step, right? And that's the good thing about using GitHub, right? And that's why I'm promoting it for you guys. So I want to create a message, almost like a friendly name that that captures the snapshot itself. And by best practices, if you will, or convention, there's two we normally use for GitHub. First commit for the first time we do it, or initial commit is what you want to use. I'm going to use initial commit. I'll do it both ways. Here's my initial commit, and I'm going to click this little checkbox, and then I'm good locally, right? But what if I want to get to my terminal, right? I want to get to my terminal from my my IDE, my little text editor here. How do I get there? Normally, you'd have to swim across to get there. You have to open up command prompt and then go CD, and you're trying to find where your stuff is, right? But not so with Visual Studio, or if on Linux or Mac, you'd have to open up a terminal window and try and find where you are. Here, all you have to do is right-click down in here somewhere, and then open in terminal or open in command prompt, and it'll take you exactly into your project folders. That's really cool. So I'll open it up, and then it'll open up my favorite version of terminal. I'm using iTerm for Mac. It's a little nicer than regular terminal. And if you notice that it's right in there, I'm COMP1073 lesson 1. That's what it is, right? Cool. So now that I've added on my files, I got to do what it says on GitHub. By the way, this won't be the first or last time that you see me doing this. So don't be afraid of, oh, what is he doing? This is like a lot of stuff to do on the terminal. And people hate the terminal because it's like, they're console, phobic, right? Don't worry about it. We're going to do lots more of this stuff. It's not the first or last time. So if I go to where I just opened this up, I have some instructions here. And one of them is, after I've done my commit, I can add this repo here as a remote repo by copying this line and pasting it into the terminal. So I'm going to go here and paste it into the terminal. Oh, if I can do it properly, how about if I copy it first, Tom? Copy and paste. There we go. And then press enter. And what this does is it basically says add this cloud repo as a remote repo from my local files to go to. So when I synchronize my local repository with my cloud repository, it knows where to go. That's what this is doing, right? Okay, that's the first thing I got to do. And then the second thing I got to do here, right, is push my files up to the cloud. So when I say git push -u origin master. And when I do that, we're going to do one more of these, by the way, today, all with the desktop tool, with nothing to do with command line. So for those people who are command line phobic, we'll do it like that too, right? So now I've pushed it up there, and if you want to get my files, all you need to do, I'm going to refresh here, is you can go up on GitHub and you can see my files here on github.com/Georgian College /comp1073-lesson1. Go ahead, check it out. It's there. Yeah. Sure. Commit. So I mean, remember what I said is when you make a commit, what you're actually doing is you're making a name for a snapshot. A commit is actually a snapshot, right, of your files in the state that they're in right now, currently. So every time I make a change to my files, I want to do a new commit. And some people ask a good question: how often do I commit? How often do I, kind of save a snapshot of my files, right? And the answer is every time you make a major change, right? Or every time you get up and leave your computer and go to the washroom, that's a good chance to do it, right? Or you eat something, or you take a break, make a commit. You're committing locally. And then when you push your local commits, whether it's one or many snapshots, up to the cloud. And the cloud takes the place of your computer. So if your computer blows up, your dog eats it, your baby spits on it, something happens to it, right? Bad things happen to your machine, you're still going to be running. Your files aren't lost, because the biggest problem with the biggest firings out there these days is when boss, I'm sorry, I know I worked on this project for about a month and I spent 100 hours on it, but it's gone. What? You're fired, right? I mean, it's just it's dumb these days. If you're a developer and you lose your files, there's a big problem, right? So we use version control for the system to safeguard our files and to keep track of our changes, okay, and also to collaborate with others. Okay, so some really good reasons to do that. So what are the 3 reasons that I use GitHub? I just said it. I'm going to ask you this question next week, right? 3 reasons why I would use GitHub. Back up your files. That's a good one. What's the other one? Version control. 3rd one. Collaborate with somebody else, right? Those are the 3 reasons. So in a team environment, those are the 3 things I'm going to ask you next week on your. I'm telling you the questions I'm going to ask you on your little test next week, right? So if you're here in class and you're watching the videos, you're going to be fine on the test. All right. So I mean, these are the kind of things I'm going to ask you, but that's what we do with GitHub. So go ahead, go check this out. Go up online, find me on GitHub, github.com/Georgian College /COMP1073 lesson 1. And if your files weren't working, if you couldn't make that font awesome bootstrap combination work just now, you can do it now, right? You can download my files. You can go to download zip, and you download the master. Yes?
So if you have the desktop app, you don't have to use
No, not at all. And I'll show you how to do that. I'll show you how to do that on. I'll do it on. I'll try and do it on Windows today. My VM's acting up a little bit, but if I can, I'll try and show you both on the Windows side and on the Mac side. Okay, but it's very similar both ways. Like you can do it without using any kind of command line whatsoever. If you're command line folk, right? But I recommend you get comfortable with the command line. Nowadays, most developers, designers, you know what? We want to be comfortable using the command line. It's not like before where if you're a designer, you're not a developer. Nowadays, it's kind of a merging into one, right? You kind of do a lot of both. Any questions so far, other than the ones we've had so far on GitHub, right? So all I've done is shown you one process, one way of uploading to GitHub. Okay. So what else can GitHub do? Well, what if I add a README? So I'm collaborating. I'm sorry, what your name is? Oren?
Corey with a C.
Corey with an Ori. Beautiful name. All right, so Ori and I are collaborating together, right? And I've got some really cool backend. Ori's an awesome designer, let's just say, and he's going to put his designs up on GitHub, and I want to get them down. I want to download them onto my local system. How do we do that? Well, let's say, for example, he just makes one little change, like adds a README file. So I'm going to add a README file online now. This is online, right? So I add a README file. The README files in GitHub are used for documentation purposes a lot of times. What does my repository do? As an example, what do I have this up here for? So I've got COMP1073 lesson 1, and I'm going to use it as a boilerplate. So COMP1073 boilerplate, file or file folder structure. I can say whatever I want in here, right? So, but this file that I'm making right now, if you notice, when I make a file or modify something online, down here in the bottom it says commit new file, and it gives me a default commit message, right? And if I accept it and click commit new file, all of a sudden online I have an extra file that I don't have locally. Locally, I don't have this file. I'm not synced up with GitHub all the time. I only sync up temporarily. It's a stateless system, right? So I push it up online, it's gone. I don't have that connection anymore. So now I got to, instead of push, I've got to pull, right? So I got to do the same thing. So we'll do the same thing with our command, right? So here on the command line, I'll say git pull. When I do that, it pulls down the latest commit that I had, and if you notice, it says I just pulled my README file, and it's down in my local files here. Let's take a look and see what that looks like in Visual Studio Code, right? Here it is. Here's my README file, right? That I made online and pulled down from GitHub. So you see, this is where the collaboration takes place. I work locally, I push remotely, you work with me, I pull your changes down to me, and so on. That's kind of a simple handoff, almost like passing the baton system. There's many other ways to do this in GitHub, by the way, but this is a very simple system. So I come to you, run over to you, pass the baton to you, you take it, now you're running with it. When you're done, run over to me, come on, run over to me, right? Pass it back, right? Pass it, I'm running with the baton, I got the baton in my hand now, I'm ready to code, right? Because you gave me your code, I gave you my code, and we hand off that way. That's kind of a simplistic way of doing it. That's okay for you guys in this course. I'm okay with that, right? There's other ways to do that where you can collaborate and create different branches and so on. Yeah.
So every time you commit, it gives your file a new name. Is it a new file?
No, it adds a snapshot to your repo. So notice how up online now, I have an initial commit, and that's the snapshot, the original, my repository in its original state. Any other time I make a change, wherever I make that change, that's where I see my commit message. So for example, I made a change because I added a README file, so I see that I created my README file as a message. If I make another change, let's make another change. Let's make a change locally.
Like if you're changing the same file 20 times.
It'll keep, you can make as many commits as you want, but you wouldn't do that. If you're working on a file, you finish your milestone, you finish what you're doing, and then you commit, right? So you make whatever you're doing, whatever feature you're adding.
But it keeps all the different
changes.
versions.
Yes, yeah, it keeps that in, and it keeps it locally. There's a separate hidden folder on your machine called .git, or if you look on your local folder inside your your folder when you initialize Git. There's a hidden folder called .git that holds all your versions of your code, right? Which is kind of cool for version control, right? And up online, it holds the latest version. But if you look at commits, take a look at commits. I can see all the changes and a history of all my changes up online. So you can see I did my initial commit, then I did my README, then there's going to be other changes all up online. For each day that you do it, it's timestamped. So this is a great way of tracking what your partner's doing, for me to track your work, right? That kind of stuff. It's a great way of doing that. And it's going to be required in this course. Every time you do an assignment, you're going to have to upload it to GitHub. And that's why I'm paying you 2%, right, to create a GitHub account, create a sample repository, put something up there, right? And there's some really cool tutorials online to help you do that. And I will also help you over the next course of weeks to do that more and more. But it's due as a lab this Friday. Okay, so that means tomorrow, right? So that's when it will be due. I think it might be due today, actually. Okay, questions before I kind of pause, because I want to take a bit of a pause before we finish off, because I think we all need a bit of a break, some coffee, and a bio break. Yeah. Anyone else have any questions? All right, so let's pause right here, and then when we come back, we'll continue with actually learning some JavaScript. All right.